Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scot McKay.
How's it going, gentlemen? Welcome again to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scot McKay, at Scot McKay on both Twitter and Parler. Scot McKay on YouTube, Real Scot McKay on Instagram. As always, find us on the web at mountaintoppodcast.com, and be sure to go ahead and join us on Facebook in the Facebook group for men of character who are looking to find the right woman in their life, get greater adventure in their life, and ascend to the highest level in their career, and generally leave the world a better place someday, hopefully someday in a long time. That, of course, is the Facebook group, the Mountaintop Summit. With me today is a new friend of mine, and she and I were chit-chatting beforehand here. You guys are going to like her a lot. She's very charming and witty, and she's a former Phoenix Suns cheerleader / dancer who is now a serial entrepreneur and successful in many areas of life. One of those areas, which we're going to talk about and focus on today, is as a motivational speaker and a resilience coach, which we're going to learn more about. So I want to welcome none other than B. Evans of Emboldened Label. Welcome, B.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure, because when you contacted me saying you wanted to be on the show and said you'd listen to a few episodes, that was exactly what I wanted to hear, to let people like you on my show. And the more I found out about what you do, the more I liked it, because we never talked about this sort of thing before. Your gig, okay, your shtick, if you were a stand-up comedian, your shtick would be lose the labels and tear out the tags.
Yes.
And, it's interesting how as we go about our daily lives, that's what we do. We slap labels on things. We tag things a certain way based on our particular worldview, our direct or maybe even indirect or non-experience with things, just sometimes based on what we've heard. And you have very particular thoughts, very insightful thoughts, I might add, on how that affects our lives and how, in many ways we need to tear out the tags. And I'm looking forward to diving into that discussion. But these guys are going to come at me with torches and pitchforks, as I like to say around here, if we don't talk about you being a Phoenix Suns dancer. And I know you like to talk about those days. You're very fond of them.
I do now. Yes, I do now.
Yeah. One of the things you asked me to ask you about that, because, we started talking about so many things. I kept saying, oh, let's save it for the show. Let's save it for the show. This is too good. And you were specific in saying, make sure you ask me what my favorite part of being a Phoenix Suns cheerleader was.
Yes,
so
definitely.
You got to spill the beans. Go for it.
Okay, so the reason I tell you that is it took 13 years before anyone asked me what my favorite part of being a Phoenix Suns cheerleader was. The 3 questions I got asked more than that were, you don't make any money, do you? Do the girls hook up with the players? And are the girls drama or stupid, for lack of better words?
Those were the only 2 choices. Drama queens or stupid?
Yes. Yeah, those were the 3 most common questions I was asked, and they were asked in that exact way. And so what that leaves you with when you're a young 20-year-old female is, because you are too stupid to get a real job, are you just doing this so you can meet a rich ball player and be taken care of the rest of your life? And I always found those questions so offensive, because all of the women on the team were required to be full-time students or have a full-time job. And many of them were highly educated and already business owners or very successful in their careers while they were dancing at a young age. We were anywhere from 20 years old to about 32, I would say. So the reason I tell you to ask me what my favorite part is you would never be able to guess this in a million years. My favorite part of being a Phoenix Suns cheerleader was throwing t-shirts. So I would hurry through makeup and hair, and I would go and re-roll all of my t-shirts into tiny little balls and re-rubber band them with rubber bands I brought from home, because I was an athlete growing up. And so even though I was in this role, right, branded in this specific role as a Phoenix Suns cheerleader, I was able to really show who I was through t-shirt timeouts. And so my party trick was I could tell a fan at doors before the game when we were meeting and greeting fans, I could pick a fan and say, where are you sitting? And as long as they were under 30 rows, I could hit them with 95% accuracy. I mean, obviously, there's room for error, but it just became what I was known for. And it was a way for me to stand out amongst this very this very tightly branded, organization. When you are a dancer, you need to look the same. You need to be unified. There's a lot of rules surrounding needing to kind of have a certain image. And so as a t-shirt timeout performer, I could let loose and crow hop and, get the t-shirts as high up as I could. So that is my funny little anecdote of what my favorite part of being an NBA cheerleader was.
Now, see here, in my position as a guy, I can't believe you didn't mention those cool air guns they use to do that.
No, I would never use an air gun.
Well, what the heck's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you use something cool like that? That's like a t-shirt
my regular
bazooka.
Gun. Oh, doesn't every guy want to see a girl who can like throw a t-shirt really far?
Well, maybe not in particular. I mean, that's not my wildest fantasy personally. But now that you mention it, a woman who can actually throw is rather interesting. In my case, It's more of a turn on when women know how to ride a bike. But these guys know that already. Similar.
Yeah, that I don't know how to do. I can't help you there.
Now, you know what I've noticed is you mentioned that, well, you know what? You kind of indirectly alluded to the fact that people have this stereotype about professional cheerleaders, like NBA, NFL cheerleaders, right? That's what you were getting at. And you were very quick to point out that was, not really a fair stereotype, at least in your case. And I want to point out to the guys listening that I have known several NBA cheerleaders, and everyone I've ever met was very charming and sweet and liked men and just seemed very friendly. They weren't bitter, stuck up women who just seemed like they were trying to reject guys and were on their own pedestal because of how beautiful and hot they were. They seemed very personable. And I can't help but think that if you were kind of bitchy and stuck up, you wouldn't make it through the qualifying process to get the job to begin with. Because at least here in San Antonio, there are like 5,000 women who try out for 16 spots. So I can imagine how that was disheartening to you. And maybe you were kind of put in a box you didn't belong in. And certainly, if you look at some of the women who used to be cheerleaders in pro sports and now, have a few more birthday candles to their credit and have gone on to something else, a lot of them are very, very impressive women. One of them who comes to mind is Emily Compagno on Fox News, who's very smart and a lawyer and gorgeous, by the way, probably, in my opinion, the hottest woman on cable news. And she was a Raiders cheerleader. And you would never know it until she says so. So I love the fact that you shared that. And for the guys listening, we've had at least 3 of you guys come through the ranks here and learn the ropes with getting better with women and ended up dating NBA cheerleaders. And we have a couple other guys who have dated NFL cheerleaders. And all of them have said, hey, you know what? They were just great women. They were just a lot of fun, very friendly and very personable, very comfortable in their own skin. They knew they were beautiful. They know they were desirable to men, but they didn't let it get to their head because they had a very holistic vision for themselves of being a quality human being, right? So maybe the first place we could go in terms of tags is how men see a pretty woman and go, oh, well, she's going to be depending solely on her looks. She's going to be really bitchy. She's probably going to just take great joy in being mean to men and rejecting them. And she's probably just going to want me for my money anyway and completely lack character. And, I'm guessing, and it's an educated guess, you're going to say, well, that's not always true. Now, is it?
No, not at all. No. But I also think that we can perceive tags. So when I tell you about those 3 questions, I wasn't a super confident young woman. I was a tomboy growing up, so I did not know the hair and makeup and glam and glitz of being an NBA cheerleader until I was one. And then I was sort of thrown into this land of attention and affection and, people looking up to me to be something that I wasn't prepared to be. I wasn't the overly confident and self-assured young woman. And so those tags that I came out with are not the same as maybe another woman that I danced with. What I think is interesting about Tear Out the Tags is we can actually perceive what people are thinking about us based on questions that they ask or statements that they say, and it doesn't make them true. So I don't think that every person that has ever asked me that was objectifying me or was looking down upon me. But through my experience, I learned to not tell anyone that I was an NBA cheerleader. So for almost 13 years, I didn't mention it. I was almost ashamed of it. And it was through my personal experience. Now, here I am as a coach. This is what I do this is what I do for a living. This is what I do. It's my passion. It's my impact in the world. And I had to take that cheerleader tag that was negatively sitting inside of me. I had to take it out, redefine it, and say, I'm still a professional cheerleader. I'm just not shaking pom-poms anymore. Although I did try out for the Denver Bronco cheerleaders this year, and I made it to the top 50 finalists. And thanks to COVID, there were some adjustments made, but I almost was a professional cheerleader again here in my later years. So interestingly enough, when at Tear Out the Tags, sometimes we have labels that are just misdefined. And so we have to take them out and kind of visit with them a little bit. And oftentimes they get put back in a positive way.
Oh, good grief. If you're in your later years, we're all in trouble.
Well, later years for, pro dancing isn't very old. It's kind of like being a professional athlete. So
isn't there like a 45-year-old woman who was going to be an Olympic gymnast this year?
I think there are a couple, and there was
Amazing.
A gal, I think she was 39, and I'm trying to remember what team she was with the NFL. But there have been some of us that have gone a little longer with the sport for sure.
Yeah, interesting. I love the fact that you said, hey, you know what? Now that I'm a coach, I'm still a professional cheerleader.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually told guys that. I mean, I'm certainly not cut out to be an NFL cheerleader or an NBA cheerleader, obviously, but I'm still a cheerleader for these guys because I am their greatest advocate. I'm here to motivate. I'm here to cheer them on. And
Definitely.
Coaches do that. I mean, I'm a San Antonio Spurs fan. Greg Popovich is no cheerleader, at least not visually. But
Right.
He is a cheerleader to his guys because coaching and cheering someone on both involve motivation, and they both involve giving someone that boost to succeed. So in many ways, being a cheerleader for an NFL team, or heck, for a high school team, is not unlike being part of the coaching staff. You're there to help ensure victory for the people you would love to see win.
Yeah, and you're really there to connect, right? You're connecting the audience to the game, or you're connecting the mission to the person. It's the same concept. I'm curious how many of your audience members would call themselves a cheerleader, though?
As a guy?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think it's a tag, to use your own vernacular, or a label that guys would choose to describe themselves, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like a very feminine tag. Although, you go to colleges and there are guys on the cheerleading squad, and boy, they're around women all the time, which the joke's on us, right? But yeah, I think that's a shining example of how a tag really is defined in our mind by a lot of ancillary elements that may or may not best describe it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you talked about how people come to us and they assign tags to us. They come with their own preconceived notions, and we can either choose to be offended by that or even affected by that. Oh my God, this person thinks I'm this, therefore I must be that. Or we can have the presence of mind, the maturity, and I guess evolution of self-image within ourselves to kind of realize, people are going to come at us with whatever they're going to come at us with. And yet when we have a sober sense of who we are, what we're about, and what we believe in, it doesn't really hurt us as bad as it could if we were still kind of spinning our wheels trying to figure out our identity, right?
Yes. And I would even challenge the way you said that, in that we perceive that people are coming at us. But a lot of times people are clueless that they've dropped a tag for you, right? We imagine you're walking through the airport and you drop a piece of, let's say a paper cup. Well, someone comes along and has to pick that paper cup up. And it's the same concept. Someone's going to drop a tag. There's tags sort of swirling around in events and experiences and relationships. So there are tags dropped. You and I actually, in our conversation before this, there were 48 tags that I noted on my paper here. And they're just simply words that are said. Now, if you had said a word that pings an emotional injury inside me, I may get offended, right? And that's how the world works. That's how we're functioning. We all mentally it's human nature to put people in categories, to make assumptions, to try to understand people. And a lot of us don't practice curiosity through our lives. A lot of us aren't like you with a very successful podcast and get to ask questions for a living. And so many people forget to ask questions. Many people just make assumptions and sort of move on with their day. And so, a big one that I wore for a long time that this is one you don't get a choice with, is millennial. Well, I can pretend like I'm not a millennial. I can try to argue that, but I'm absolutely born in the time frame of a millennial. So the big joke about millennials is we're not resilient, we're snowflakes, we're sensitive, we're not hard workers, all of these things. So I would just get offended when someone would call me a millennial. Well, it turns out I am low resilience. I'm not a super tough cookie. So I get knocked over fairly easily. And sometimes I need someone to come and sort of get me back going in the forward motion. But because I was so offended by millennial, I could never get anywhere near my resilience tag. Therefore, I could never build resilience because I wasn't willing to accept that I wasn't resilient. So it's just an example of how we are blocked by these tags because, we haven't been taught to focus on the right ones and get underneath to the core of what's really pinging that offense in you. And so even though, yes, we get labels from other people, we get tags from places and experiences, it's our choice of what we attach and wear with us everywhere we go.
And that's empowering. Absolutely.
Super.
As opposed to being a victim. And we talk a lot about that around here. My head's spinning a little bit because it's occurring to me, this is a huge topic. And we do this indiscriminately in our lives all the time. We can say, oh, you know what? I'm a tolerant person. I'm a curious person. I give people the benefit of the doubt. And then we're spouting tags like a big dog all day long. See, I just
all day long.
See what I just did there? Yeah. They're big dogs for spouting the tags, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because you called me out on the tag that I used. And I'm thinking to myself, man, you know what? You're the tear out the tags expert. I don't even dabble in this particular subject, let alone immerse myself in it. So, in my case, the indignities are just getting on a roll here. You wait. I'm sure I'm going to be guilty of even greater and more egregious tagging before this is over. You talked about being a tomboy growing up, and that's another subject that we cover around here. And I found it fascinating that once again, here's another woman on the show. You probably would have no way of knowing this. I know you've listened to a few of our shows, but you would have gotten lucky to find the few where we talk about this, where a lot of guys seem to look at a woman who is a tomboy as someone who's not very feminine, someone who's kind of butchy. And yet I find that women who are tomboys simply like to do what the guys like to do. They're a little rough around the edges. They like to get their fingernails dirty instead of being all prissy, stuff like that. And when you really dig into what makes a woman a tomboy, it's a desire to be around men. She likes guys more. She likes what the guys do more. And I don't think it makes women butchy or not attractive or really anything that would constitute a negative tag in the eyes of a normal, red-blooded, dare I say, heterosexual man. Yet you grew up in rural Wyoming and then moved to Durango, Colorado, and your upbringing caused you, I'm sure, to be a little rough around the edges. You weren't in mollycoddled Californian suburbia.
Right. So, no, not at all.
All of this has to do with who you become and how you look at the world, and maybe some of the tags you use to describe yourself come from that upbringing. And then maybe it's a shock to the system to meet someone else who's different and looks at the world a different way and may tag you differently. How do you reconcile all of those feelings, all of those thoughts, everything that we may feel confronted with in our daily interactions with people like that?
I think that's a perfect definition of how you can get stuck also.
You mean I didn't do any politically incorrect tags there? Awesome.
Well,
I'm on a roll.
So it's interesting. I do think that there can be women who just get along with the guys and they want to get rough and dirty, and they're what do they call them? Like, I'm a guy's girl, right? That's what they call themselves. Now I've known a lot of women like that who are haters to women who wear makeup and do their hair and, are into fashion or anything like that. And so I think sometimes you can get limited in that as well, because you feel like you're leaving some kind of identity behind if you go and you want to get dressed up for a nice date, or you want to have a little bit of feminine in your life. And I experienced this when I went from athletics to cheerleading. There was some serious, what's the word I'm looking for? Betrayal. It was like a betrayal to my athletics. So when I was in high school, actually, is when I started cheerleading, and I was a competitive softball player. So I was about 2 weeks out from trying out for the varsity softball team. I had just finished my cheerleading season. We had won the state championship for cheerleading that year, which became a huge joke in the high school because, cheerleaders aren't athletes to real, I'm air quoting, real athletes. And so my softball coach at the time walks up to me one morning in the locker room and she says, "I won't put a paper shaker on varsity." And I just sort of sat there in this shock of, well, I am a cheerleader. So are you telling me you're cutting me from the team before I show up for tryouts? Or are you telling me if I choose to come to varsity softball tryouts that I can no longer cheer? And, back then I was a little more of I was a pistol. So I was just irritated in general that she was giving me 2 tags that I had to choose from. So I played tennis that year and quit both sports because I was so annoyed, which is kind of just a personality trait of mine. But to your point, I was an athlete. I loved being an athlete. I loved being rough and tumble. My brother was an athlete. I had a lot of that influence. Obviously, growing up in oil and gas, I was out playing in the mud and dirt when my parents would be working. But I had this desire to be a girly girl too. And I had, I wanted to be flexible and I wanted to be able to jump and touch my toes. And it was appealing to me. So I was standing in 2 different worlds. One wasn't accepting the other and the other wasn't accepting of the first. And so that was really the beginning of where I started feeling like I had to wear these tags and be a certain brand depending on what I was participating in. And that goes the same, I worked in oil and gas for most of my career. Well, at the time I was beginning my career in oil and gas, I was also an NBA cheerleader. You want to talk about, showing up and having to be 2 different people and 2 different brands. And so my tags had to sort of shift depending on where I was and what I was doing. Now I say had to, and that's victim language. But what ends up happening is you end up with not a great sense of identity when you just keep wearing hats that other people are placing on you. So I call it a specialized polymath. So it's, I dabble in a lot of things and I'm good at a lot of things, but that makes me have to take on a lot of different brands. So you would probably call it the Jack or Jane of all trades. And so that's, it's a perfect example of how tags come to our lives.
Actually, I love the word polymath because it triggers my sense of humor in a rather prurient way. Because it seems to me the only people who really know what the hell a polymath is are polymaths.
Yeah. Right.
But I just find that to be a curious reality.
Well, and aren't we all specialized polymaths? Like we all have walked a unique line through our lives. And I mean, there's just too many experiences that you've walked through to not have an experience where you've learned something from many different things, whether it be, sports, hobbies, jobs, relationships, family stuff, right? We could have a whole nother conversation about family expectations.
Yeah, especially if you're in your later stage of life like me over here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. No, anyway, I love what you said about how people tend to come up to you and pigeonhole you. Or, indeed, we come up to each other and pigeonhole each other. And some people allow themselves to be pigeonholed. Mm-hmm. When I was being raised, my parents are great people, but they said, hey, you know what? You're not an athlete. You're not an artist. You're a smart kid. You're a genius.
Oh.
So bury your nose in books and be the smart kid. You're not going to excel at these other things. And the very first time I ever excelled at sports in a way that was absolutely quantifiable, I still, to this day, consider it one of my 5 greatest accomplishments. Mm-hmm. Because I broke out, I tore off that label.
Yeah.
Once and for all. And now, of course, I'm raising my kids these days to be not only polymaths, but to be well-rounded, as it were, in terms of art and intellectual stuff, and indeed sports and other things too, culturally. They're world travelers at a very young age, stuff like that. And based on what you said, I think we can kind of deduce that it's sort of a ripoff to ourselves. It's kind of a little bit of a shame if, for example, a woman says, hey, you know what I do? I'm a tomboy. I don't paint my nails. I don't wear little black dresses. I look good in jeans, not the little black dress. I'm not one of those people. I do what I do. I do me. I do it really well. And there's no room for anything else. When in reality, in my mind, and you can riff off this, B, the people who can make those shifts and not be a fish out of water simply because the environment changes and seem to have this incredible, multifaceted ability to know a little bit about a lot. And of course, that has to do with curiosity, like you already alluded to.
Yes, yeah.
And be able to do a little of everything. Those people are amazing. And they're not fake and they're not in any way illegitimized by that. But I think it makes them deeper people, for lack of a better word.
Well, we're not taught to discover outside of the path. Okay. So the path being, and it obviously depends on where you're from, but I think we could probably agree that the typical path is, graduate high school, do as well as possible, get into a good college. For women, now I would light a female audience up with this, but for a lot of women, they're told, find a husband in college, right? Find the man you're going to marry, find your dream guy, because we all want to have families and get married. And the American dream for females is that. So
the MRS degree, right?
The MRS degree. Yep. And that it is still a thing. I actually have had a conversation recently with a college student that's her parents are paying for her to go to a very expensive school to get that MRS degree. And they're not shy about it. They're sending her there to find a successful man who's highly educated. And what comes after that? You and I talked right before the show started that we're both in blended families. Well, I followed that path and I wasn't necessarily told by my parents that that's what I needed to do. That was more societal. It was more of just a general story that you knew you needed to follow. Well, when my marriage didn't work out and I'm standing there as a single parent with 2 kids, working mom, going, wow, this is not it's not the sight that I had for my life. Then all of a sudden, this gift happened for me. I had this ability to discover, what is my life gonna look like? What is my life, what meaning is it going to take on? How is it going to change with this experience of being a single parent? You want to talk about a tag. Single parent is a tag I never planned on wearing. It's one that you have to face pretty confidently and pretty courageously, which is the emboldened way. And it's that discovery or lack thereof that's really limiting people in their lives. How bored are we as a society with this generalized story? Everyone's sitting in their corporate jobs, miserable with their 2-hour-a-day commutes, and no one's willing to go discover and be uncomfortable stepping out of that comfort zone.
Because it would feel fake for a split second there, or a week or 2 or a month.
It's interesting. A lot of people will say they're scared to fail, but I think there's so much more fear of success. I think there's so much more fear of success and being able to look back at the people who said you couldn't do it. And you're like, dang, I did it. Look at me. I'm here. And I don't know why that is, but it's almost like people feel like they're betraying that brand that they were taught they needed to be.
Well, I think that's a point well taken. And of course, we could talk about fear of success as a separate topic for a completely different show. And you're welcome back to do that. But my elevator pitch on fear of success is people have dreams, but with those dreams come a lot of work, a lot of responsibility, and a lot of new and unknown entities behind it. In other words, okay, I want to become a stand-up comedian, so I'm going to learn how to be funny. So then you'd go do some open mic nights. Next thing you know, they invite you to be the MC for the Saturday night lineup with some really legitimate famous people. The famous guy goes, damn, you know what? You're funny. You should come on tour with me. And the next thing you know, your whole life has changed. And you're going to be a fish out of water in a completely new world where you could fail and you're not going to have a steady paycheck. And now you have pressure to be funny every night. It's like, I didn't sign up for this.
Right.
And all of the stuff in the back of your mind when you were saying, hey, you know what? I'd like to be a stand-up comedian was throwing red flags at you saying, yeah, do you really want that? I mean, it would be great on paper to be a stand-up comedian, but something in your subconscious was screaming, no, it's going to be too disruptive. And that's where the fear of success comes in.
Yeah, it's paralyzation, right? Yeah.
Sometimes guys go through dry spells with women. They haven't been on a date for a while. They haven't been physically intimate with a woman for a while. And they'll tell me, they'll scream it from the rooftops. My goodness, I'd love to have a woman who's attracted to me and I haven't had sex in 10 years. Well, it's amazing how many of those guys, almost like clockwork, will find themselves in a position where, you know what, they finally attracted a woman and they sabotage it. They blow it.
Totally, yeah.
Because they're afraid of what's going to happen once she's attracted. It's like, oh God, now I got to get her back to my apartment. Now we might get naked. What if I don't perform? What if I perform too quickly? I can't handle it. And the wheels fall off. And that's fear of success.
Yeah. And that tag, that short tag of the inexperience just absolutely takes over their mind and paralyzes them with the inability to do anything besides think of that tag.
Well, you're a rather attractive woman with some experience with guys. What would you tell a guy who's feeling that? Relax and just deal with it? Or how do you tear out that tag?
I think the judgments is where that comes into play.
Yeah.
So they're already putting so much pressure on themselves because of the judgments that they believe that this woman is going to have. When the only reason they're having those assumptions is because they make their own judgments, either about that woman or other women. And so you're left with all these tags that you actually created because you're judging the others, right? You're judging the women, or for women, they're judging the men. And so the self-sabotage is really in all of this labeling of all the assumptions that we think are going to happen. So yeah, you're not able to be yourself when you're that nervous and you're playing this hamster wheel of thoughts around in your brain. Most beautiful women don't get treated very well on dates. So if you are a man listening to the show, all you got to do is ask brilliant questions and be genuinely interested in what she has to say. See her for more than beautiful. Every beautiful woman who looks like they walked off the cover of a magazine, they get told they're pretty. Do not tell a beautiful woman they look pretty. Tell them how brilliant they are, right? Have interesting and meaningful conversation. It's really not that hard.
Yeah, it separates you from the pack. All the
Big
insidious self-taggery that we inflict upon ourselves, right? It's just crazy.
Definitely.
But I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think that's a fantastic point with which to punctuate this show. Her name is B. Evans of Embolden Label, and she is a motivational speaker and a resilience coach. Do you have a book on Amazon?
I am writing my book, and it's going to be called Tear Out the Tags, but it is not done yet. But I'd be happy if you guys watch for it.
So meanwhile, yeah, guys, look for that on Amazon. And until then, what you guys can do is go to mountaintoppodcast.com/B, like a bumblebee. Hey, you didn't meet your husband on Bumble, did you?
No, absolutely not.
Oh,
he wouldn't be caught dead on Bumble.
Well, neither would I, or would I have either. But boy, would that have been a rather interesting coincidence. mountaintoppodcast.com/B is the place to go. And that will take you to B. Evans's Instagram account, which is EMBLDN label. LABEL, but you don't have to remember that because I'm going to take you right there by going to mountaintoppodcast.com/BBEE. B, what a charming and wonderful person you are. Thank you so much for joining us. And not only did you help us cut through some of the stereotypes within ourselves, but some of the stereotypes that, we tend to slap on other people. And I'm glad you came here and helped us lose the labels. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, thanks for the great labels you just gave me. I'm going to just attach those tags as I go. Thank you.
Yeah, put those as a quote on your website and make sure you give me a backlink. That would really help.
Sounds great. I can handle that.
All right, guys. And when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com, what you need to do is sign up for 25 minutes talking to me personally for free. I'm exactly who you think I'm going to be. Just go to mountaintoppodcast.com and click the little red button in the upper right-hand corner. Some of you guys have done that already. Some of you guys have been on the fence about it. Some of you guys are just flat out procrastinating, but we're getting to the end of the infamous year 2020, and it's time to have 2021 foresight, which is my new slogan that I'm using. 2021 foresight is what you'll get when you talk to me for 25 minutes for free. And it all starts with clicking on the red button in the upper right-hand corner at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you guys again real soon, this is Scot McKay from X and Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X and Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X and Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.